Welcome, heroes. Today, we continue our epic journey through the trilogy of the 12 Feats of Apollo. This is the second chapter, where we uncover more of the deeds and challenges faced by the god of light, arts, and prophecy. Get ready to dive into fascinating myths and unveil the secrets that shaped Apollo's legend. May the flame of knowledge guide us. 5. Jason, the Argonauts, and the Golden Fleece. The prophecy of Apollo was, from the outset, a key to understanding what was truly at stake in Jason's journey. Consulting the oracle was not merely a search for practical guidance, but also a moment of profound revelation. Apollo, the god of truth and light, did not only reveal where Jason should go, but also the spiritual and moral nature of the trials he would face. Colchis, where the Golden Fleece was guarded, was not just a distant land, but a nearly mythical territory, shrouded in mystery and fear, which made the quest even more superhuman. The Golden Fleece represented an artifact of transcendent power, and its symbolism extended beyond physical gold. The fleece, or golden hide, was associated with the god Phrixus, who, according to legend, had been saved from sacrifice by a winged ram sent by Zeus. The ram's skin was then consecrated as a divine symbol of protection, power, and legitimacy. Acquiring the Golden Fleece was more than an act of strength, it was a representation of the possibility of achieving almost divine power or establishing a direct connection with the gods themselves. This power was imbued with a sacred aura that could alter the fate of a dynasty, as in the case of Jason, who sought the restoration of his throne in Iolcus. Apollo's warning about the challenges to be faced was not a mere formality, but a reflection of the great spiritual and moral test that Jason and his companions would have to endure. The dragons that guarded the fleece were more than physical creatures, they represented the chaotic and destructive forces of the world, both external and internal. The idea of the dragon in many cultures, including the Greek, is often symbolic. It is the guardian of what is most sacred, but also the bearer of great temptations. For Jason, the dragon was not just a physical obstacle, but a metaphor for his own fears and desires that could threaten his mission. Moreover, the quest was loaded with elements of betrayal and internal conflict. Although Jason gathered a group of heroes, the cohesion of the group would be tested as extraordinary challenges arose. The fact that the Argonauts came from different origins and had personal interests made their relationships unstable. Even Jason's character was put to the test. In several versions of the story, he is depicted as willing to form alliances with those who were morally questionable, which creates tension between his loyalty to Apollo, to his companions, and to his own ambition. For example, Medea, the daughter of King Aeetes, would be one of the most emblematic figures of this betrayal conflict. She, with her magical powers, would assist Jason, but would later betray him. Their relationship is far from simple. Medea represents both divine aid and the temptation that arises when the forces of love and ambition intertwine. Throughout the journey, Jason would need to struggle against doubt and temptation, as he was not only facing monsters but also the human dilemmas of morality, honor, and loyalty. Colchis itself was more than just an exotic location. It was a symbol of the farthest reaches of the known world, where good and evil blur, and where the fight for a greater ideal mingles with personal interests. The journey to this land, in addition to being a physical journey, became a spiritual one, where the heroes were challenged not only by creatures and obstacles but by their own inner weaknesses. Apollo's role in the prophecy and, by extension, in Jason's journey, should be seen as that of an intermediary between the divine and human worlds. Apollo not only guided Jason but also maintained a constant watch over the journey, making it clear that the heroes were treading a path approved by the gods, but that the gods also intervened and played their own game. This is exemplified by the help of Hera and Athena during the mission, but also in the obstacles and tests the deities imposed on the group. The presence of the gods, therefore, was both a support and a test. Jason and the Argonauts were constantly tested not only in their physical strength but also in their capacity to act with honor, wisdom, and justice. This myth reinforces divine symbolism, the spiritual and moral complexities of the journey, and the relationship between Jason and the gods. The quest, far from being a simple treasure hunt, was a trial of character, where each choice reflected the greater forces of fate and morality. 6. Agamemnon and the sacrifice of Iphigenia. The story of Iphigenia's sacrifice, daughter of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, begins with a grave mistake made by the king of Mycenae. He offends the goddess Artemis by killing one of her sacred deer during a hunt. Artemis, the goddess of hunting, wild nature, and fertility, could not tolerate such sacrilege, and as punishment, she stopped the winds that would carry the Greek forces to the Trojan War. The Greek army was gathered at Aulis, ready to sail, but without wind to move their ships, they were at the mercy of the goddess. In this desperate situation, Agamemnon consults the oracle of Apollo, seeking a solution. Apollo, through his oracle at Delphi, reveals that the only way to appease Artemis's wrath and restore favorable winds was to sacrifice Iphigenia, Agamemnon's daughter. The god thus demands the sacrifice of his own daughter as a form of reparation for the offense against the goddess. Apollo's role in the prophecy and, by extension, in Jason's journey, should be seen as that of an intermediary between the divine and human worlds. Apollo not only guided Jason but also maintained a constant watch over the journey, making it clear that the heroes were treading a path approved by the gods, but that the gods also intervened and played their own game. This is exemplified by the help of Hera and Athena during the mission, but also in the obstacles and tests the deities imposed on the group. The presence of the gods, therefore, was both a support and a test. Jason and the Argonauts were constantly tested not only in their physical strength but also in their capacity to act with honor, wisdom, and justice. This myth reinforces divine symbolism, the spiritual and moral complexities of the journey, and the relationship between Jason and the gods. The quest, far from being a simple treasure hunt, was a trial of character, where each choice reflected the greater forces of fate and morality. 6. Agamemnon and the sacrifice of Iphigenia. The story of Iphigenia's sacrifice, daughter of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, begins with a grave mistake made by the king of Mycenae. He offends the goddess Artemis by killing one of her sacred deer during a hunt. Artemis, the goddess of hunting, wild nature, and fertility, could not tolerate such sacrilege, and as punishment, she stopped the winds that would carry the Greek forces to the Trojan War. The Greek army was gathered at Aulis, ready to sail, but without wind to move their ships, they were at the mercy of the goddess. In this desperate situation, Agamemnon consults the oracle of Apollo, seeking a solution. Apollo, through his oracle at Delphi, reveals that the only way to appease Artemis's wrath and restore favorable winds was to sacrifice Iphigenia, Agamemnon's daughter. The god thus demands the sacrifice of his own daughter as a form of reparation for the offense against the goddess. This demand from Apollo, though a direct instruction, reveals the tragic cost of human arrogance and the god's interference in the fate of mortals. Agamemnon, despite being a powerful king and leader of the Greek coalition, finds himself in an impossible situation where the greater good, the victory in war, requires an incalculable price. He must choose between the life of his beloved daughter and the success of his mission, which is of great importance for the honor of his city and the future of the Greeks. The dilemma is profound, as he must sacrifice Iphigenia, whom he loves dearly, in order to restore the order of the universe and ensure the success of his undertaking. Agamemnon's decision to sacrifice his daughter is one of the most tragic choices in Greek mythology. In some versions of the story, he hesitates deeply but ultimately gives in to the necessity of fulfilling the will of the gods, demonstrating the helplessness of mortals in the face of divine decrees. However, in other versions, the plot becomes more complex. Agamemnon deceives Iphigenia, making her believe that she would be sacrificed as part of a marriage to the hero Achilles. When she arrives at the site of the sacrifice, the tragedy unfolds, and Iphigenia is killed on Artemis's altar. Thus, this sacrifice is not just an inevitable fate, but also a profound reflection on the cost of the choices made by Agamemnon. He is not only dealing with the wrath of Artemis, but also with the very nature of human arrogance, which, by challenging the natural and divine order, often must pay a very high price. Agamemnon's choice to sacrifice Iphigenia to save the Greeks and conquer Troy reveals the limitations of the human condition in the face of the gods' power, but also highlights the weight of decisions made by the king. Throughout mythology, the tragedy of Iphigenia triggers a series of events that will lead to Agamemnon's downfall. When he returns triumphantly from the Trojan War, he is murdered by his wife, Clytemnestra, in revenge for the death of their daughter. Agamemnon's death, orchestrated by Clytemnestra, reflects how Iphigenia's sacrifice marks not only Agamemnon's life but the entire royal lineage. He paid a high price for victory in war, but the blood of his daughter brings to light the violence and tragic fate his actions have wrought. Apollo's role as the god who reveals the necessity of the sacrifice is central, as he represents the power of divine justice, but also the impassivity of the gods. Apollo, in many situations, acts as a messenger of an inescapable fate, guiding humans in the directions he deems correct, but without regard for human feelings or the consequences. His intervention underscores the idea that the gods, as rulers of the cosmos, often demand sacrifices that exceed the understanding of mortals. Iphigenia's sacrifice reflects the tension between human desires and the uncompromising needs of the divine world. Apollo is not portrayed as a cruel or malicious being, but as the emissary of cosmic balance. His revelation does not serve as a judgment of right or wrong, but as a demand to restore universal order. He highlights the notion that, in the ancient Greek world, fate was often beyond the control of mortals, and that even the most tragic choices could be seen as a form of restoring divine balance. 7. The Curse of Sisyphus and the Founding of Corinth. Sisyphus is an emblematic figure in Greek mythology, famous for his cunning and ability to deceive the gods. His story is not just one of disobedience but also a reflection of the complex relationships between mortals and divinities, particularly in regard to power, greed, and punishment. Sisyphus is credited with founding the city of Corinth, one of the greatest urban centers of ancient Greece, and his name became associated both with the prosperity of Corinth and his strategic abilities. According to some versions, he was guided by Apollo, who helped him establish the city. Apollo, the god of music, prophecy, and light, was involved in the foundation of Corinth, offering his wisdom for the city's growth and organization. However, Sisyphus's cunning and greedy nature soon led him to challenge the gods themselves. In his pursuit of power and control, he had no qualms about manipulating situations and deceiving the gods whenever it suited him. One of the most significant examples of this occurs when Sisyphus tricks Death, Thanatos. He manages to imprison Death, preventing the souls of the dead from descending into the underworld. By doing this, he not only defied the natural laws but also the divine order, which requires all things, mortal and immortal, to follow their destined path. His behavior, especially his disrespect for divine laws and the cosmic order, led the gods to make a drastic decision. Zeus, the king of the gods, was particularly enraged by Sisyphus's audacity. However, the punishment did not come immediately but was reserved for the underworld, a place where mortals face eternal punishments. Apollo, as the god of truth and justice, was one of the divinities who foresaw Sisyphus's punishment and warned him of the impending consequences. The prophecy was clear: Sisyphus was to be condemned to eternal punishment, a symbol of human transgression against the immutable laws of the gods. The curse of Sisyphus is one of the most emblematic and significant punishments in Greek mythology. He was condemned to push a boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back to the base every time he was about to reach the top. This endless cycle represented futility and eternal frustration, symbolizing the aimless nature of Sisyphus's actions, where no matter how much effort he exerted, he would never reach his final goal. This punishment, imposed by Apollo and the other gods, serves as a powerful metaphor for the nature of human greed and the transgression of limits imposed by the gods. The boulder, enormous and heavy, symbolizes the burden of carrying the consequences of one's actions, particularly when violating the fundamental principles of the cosmos and divine morality. Sisyphus, in constantly attempting to ascend the mountain with the boulder, is symbolically trying to reach the unattainable, attempting to surpass the limits set by greater forces, represented by the gods. However, Sisyphus's punishment is not only a matter of physical punishment but also a philosophical reflection. The myth can be interpreted as a meditation on the emptiness and futility of unchecked ambition and the human desire for absolute control, as well as a critique of those who seek to disrespect higher forces for selfish purposes. The incessant repetition of pushing the boulder also alludes to the eternal cycle of human actions, in which effort and the pursuit of power are often futile or self-destructive. Apollo, by delivering the prophecy and playing a role in the divine justice that led to Sisyphus's punishment, represents the power of truth and cosmic order. Apollo's message was not only about punishment but also about the recognition of universal truth and balance that cannot be violated without consequence. He emphasizes that the pursuit of power, when not accompanied by humility and respect for natural and divine limits, leads to ruin. Sisyphus's punishment thus becomes a symbol of despair, and he serves as an example of how, by challenging the gods, one challenges his own nature, forced to live a life of incessant frustration. The curse of Sisyphus serves as a deep reflection on the relationship between power and punishment, and the limits that the gods impose on mortals. The story teaches that the transgression of these limits, whether out of greed, selfishness, or arrogance, results in an irreversible fate of isolation and frustration. In this context, Apollo acts as a revealing force of truth and destiny, warning mortals that disrespecting the gods not only weakens the individual but also threatens the cosmic order. 8. The ambiguity of the prophecy to Croesus. Croesus, the king of Lydia, is a historical figure who became legendary due to his immense wealth and his relationship with Greek oracles, particularly the one at Delphi. He ruled one of the wealthiest kingdoms in Asia Minor and, at the height of his power, decided to expand his domain by attacking the Persian Empire, then ruled by Cyrus the Great. In search of guidance for this crucial decision, Croesus consulted the oracle of Apollo. When consulting Apollo, the oracle gave an enigmatic response: "You will destroy a great empire." Croesus, seeing the word "destroy" and assuming that the great empire in question was Cyrus's Persian Empire, interpreted the response as a clear sign that victory was guaranteed and that his invasion would result in the destruction of the Persian Empire. Filled with confidence, he proceeded with the attack, without questioning the true nature of the prophecy. However, the ambiguity of the prophecy revealed itself tragically. The empire destroyed was not the Persian Empire, but Croesus's own. After being defeated by Cyrus at the Battle of Tyria, circa 547 BCE, Croesus saw his cities and wealth taken by the Persians. The destruction predicted by the prophecy was not a victory but a catastrophe for the king of Lydia. In a cruel twist of irony, Apollo's prophecy was fulfilled, but not in the way Croesus had imagined. This event not only describes a military defeat but also exposes one of the most fascinating and complex aspects of Greek prophecies: ambiguity. Apollo, as a god of truth and wisdom, did not provide a clear and definitive answer about who would be destroyed. Instead, he left the interpretation in Croesus's hands, testing his wisdom, humility, and ability to discern the true meaning of the divine words. The test of wisdom and humility. Apollo's prophecy places Croesus in a delicate position. The enigmatic response was a challenge to human wisdom, a test that even the most powerful and wealthy mortals could not blindly trust the words of the gods without questioning them. Apollo did not leave a simple message of victory or defeat, he provided only a partial vision open to interpretation. This implied that Croesus should be humble and cautious when making decisions, recognizing that he did not have absolute control over the will of the gods. However, Croesus's mistake was interpreting the prophecy in a one-sided manner, focusing on the idea of destruction and assuming that the destruction would be of the enemy's empire. This error reveals a lack of reflection on the possible ambiguities in Apollo's response and a lack of humility in questioning the god's wisdom. Consumed by confidence in his fortune and power, Croesus did not consider the possibility that he could be the great empire to be destroyed. He failed to realize that true wisdom is not just about hearing the words of an oracle but critically pondering them, understanding that the future can be uncertain and full of twists. The role of Apollo and the nature of prophecies. Apollo's prophecy to Croesus highlights an important aspect of divine prophecies: they are often not clear or unambiguous, but are filled with uncertainties. Greek gods, and especially Apollo, frequently provided answers that tested the intelligence and character of mortals, challenging them to reflect deeply on their choices and their consequences. These answers were not meant to be taken literally but to help mortals deal with the complexities of fate and the limitations of human vision. In many cases, oracles served to warn humans about the risks of acting impulsively, the arrogance of believing that the gods can be controlled or fully understood. The ambiguity of Apollo's prophecies, therefore, is a way of emphasizing that human knowledge is limited, and that true wisdom lies in interpreting divine messages with humility and prudence, recognizing that the future can be more complex and unpredictable than it appears. Consequences for Croesus. After his defeat, Croesus reflected on his misinterpretation of the prophecy and the risks of blindly trusting the words of the gods without careful analysis. Once a powerful king, he now found himself at the top of a mountain of ruins. The irony of the situation is immense, as the wealth and confidence he had were not enough to prevent tragedy. In the end, Apollo, in his ambiguous nature, fulfilled the prophecy, but not in the way Croesus had imagined. The myth of Croesus and his interaction with Apollo serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed, arrogance, and lack of reflection. It shows that, although the gods may provide powerful guidance, free will and human interpretation play a crucial role in the consequences of our actions. The gods, no matter how much they offer guidance, cannot prevent the errors caused by a lack of wisdom and blindness to the complexity of fate. This reflection on the ambiguity of Apollo's prophecies not only illustrates the conflict between mortals and the gods but also offers a profound philosophical lesson on the need for wisdom, humility, and self-criticism when dealing with higher forces. With this, we wrap up the second chapter of the trilogy on the 12 feats of Apollo. I hope you felt the energy of this story and are ready for the grand finale. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the final chapter, and follow our band, Vale of Nyx, on music platforms. Music is an extension of the legends we love. See you soon, heroes.
Monte Parnasso, destino começa a dançar. Profecias que o vento começa a cantar. A morte, a vida, o tempo a consumir. O Deus da luz com os sonhos a iluminar. 12 profecias, sua voz a ecoar. Lágrimas de oráculos no ar. Futuro em chamas, passado no chão. Só Apolo que a mente e o coração. último suspiro, Apolo cantará a verdade eterna que nunca se apagará. O futuro será o eco do que ele já viu. A chama divina nunca se extinguirá. 12 profecias, sua voz a ecoar. Lágrimas, oráculos no ar. Futuro em chamas, passado